Okay, this is episode 1, the inaugural episode of a feature I'm calling Round Thorin. Now, that's not some sort of ongoing series in which I enter eating contests around the world until I become the titular Round Thorin. It's rather an incredibly witty and nuanced name for a feature, which is basically just a round table feature, but features me, Thorin. And if you haven't noticed, kind of going with that branding approach to everything I do, you know. Also, that way, if people hate on it, the one thing they can't say is, I wish there was a different host for this one, because as you can tell by the name, I have to be in them all. So commiserations if indeed you were thinking, great concept for a feature, wish he wasn't in them. Well, make your own one, make your own round pleb or something, I don't know. Speaking of round plebs, got my panel for this one. See what I did there? Yeah, there we go. Listen, I just saw cameras in front of me and I thought, free association. So for this one, we'll get into the topic, but first let's introduce the panel. So in the top right-hand corner of my overlay, I've got Conrad Janzen. Now, if you want to know who he is, right, first of all, he used to work for teams like Evil Geniuses. You worked for Cloud9 as well, right?
I did.
So he was kind of like that character Finn in the new Star Wars movies because he was part of the evil empire, but eventually he saw the light. He was like, I can't keep doing this, I've got to become, part of the light side of the force. I've got to go over. And now he is but an industry player like the rest of us, but a good guy. Now he's no longer necessarily just colonizing the world as the right-hand man of Alex Garfield. And, one day probably will be part of some sort of a war crimes tribunal, in which case he will be granted amnesty. No, wait a second. Maybe I'm thinking of a different panel where we talk about Alex Garfield, right? I'll save that for later, right? So keep it moving around. What do you do currently, Conrad? Who do you work for currently?
I currently work for Twitch TV.
I take everything I said back. He's still in the Empire. He's just on a different outpost. No, obviously, Twitch, perfectly fine company now. They got rid of Alex Garfield, right? Anyway, so keep going around the overlay. Bottom right-hand corner. Listen, no one here ascribes to any of the views that I say. I don't even know why I'm saying that disclaimer. It goes for everything in life. Bottom right-hand corner of the overlay is Noxville, who, funnily enough, they actually do use this term in Dota. They call you a statsman, as though it was like an official title, I just call them nerds. Nerds who've managed to monetize their passion for being a nerd, loving crunching numbers, Excel sheets, advanced statistics. Yeah, we're all nerds. We've just got different titles. But it's not a bad term, I guess, statsman, Yeah. It sounds like some out of cricket, though. It does sound a bit nerdy.
Yeah, we had the inaugural Statsman Bruno, and in that since then it's just been like Doctor Who, different versions, all inferior.
They don't all die by going and working for Valve, though.
Yeah,
they aren't all sacrificed to the machine.
The second one died working for Curse, so rip K-Poptosis.
Enough about that. The last member of our panel is Skim, who has been on some of my past content. He was on the one, I think it was one of the esports journalism ones or something along those lines, I think so. And obviously does his own show. It's called like Not Your Average Podcast or something. Not Your Average Esports Podcast, is that the title?
Pretty much, yeah. Your Average Esports Podcast.
It is Your Average Esports. Oh,
it is Your Average Esports Podcast.
Right, I was thinking of what my version will be when I do that.
And
it's much better and, way bigger guests and stuff. Yeah, mine will be called Not the Average. Yeah, okay. So yeah, we've got the branding on point there. We're on the same page, So who do you currently work for, Skim?
I currently work for Dota Buff as community manager.
Yes, okay, so Dota Buff.
Yes.
Where people go to look at stats in the naive hope that it will help them improve in the game.
Very much so, yes.
Even though almost every piece of advice you could give, which would instantly level someone up, just involves learning like the fundamentals of the game, like actually team playing with people, not being an arsehole, playing stuff that's appropriate in the game. So basically all the things no one will ever do in ranked Dota 2 at any point in time. So, but at least they can look at a pretty graph and go, so that's why I suck. Okay.
The greener the number, the better.
Exactly. That's what I always say about my bank account, right? Don't even know what that means. It almost meant something though, right? That's all that really matters about my content. It almost meant something. So this episode is going to be around the topic. I think it's a pretty cool topic, and it's one of those ones where, in an ideal world, I would have just watched someone else do a fantastic podcast with a great panel of guests around this topic. But it's one of those ones that people in Dota don't talk about, I notice, because some people in Dota are what I call esports royalty. And when you're esports royalty, it's where you're either such a fan favorite or you just personally have such like a very specific connection with fans that they kind of let you get away with not being judged by the same standard they might judge someone else by. So the topic of this one is going to be, why has Arteezy, we're talking about someone who for 4 years at least has been considered arguably the best player in the world, if not the best Western player, definitely an elite Premier level player, why he has never won the International, one of the Valve Majors. Obviously, we're mainly talking about the Valve Majors before the current system, where there's like 15 of them. But, we're talking about the biggest tournaments, the ones that if you were going to put a resume, this would be the top of the list. And hence why people are hailing the likes of Kuroki, Player of the Year. They pick out people in the past who've had these amazing successes. PPD, obviously. All these fantastic players. So the reason why I set it up like that he's kind of esports royalty, is because people still will say he's the best player in the world, or people will still say, oh, he was the best Western player. And yet, if you were talking about like a Chinese carry, you pretty much have to win TI to get that title. It's very rare that they're going to give you those titles, or they're going to say you still have that to do somehow. There'll always be that storyline painted around you, So let's start there then. As people who know the scene better than me, let's start with that part of the topic. Why do you think Arteezy is to some extent off limits in that kind of a way? Because I don't think it even applies to the other players in the scene as much. Like, for example, Eternal Envy, a very popular player, but he always does have that knock again. I realize he has now won a Valve Major, but he always has that knock that he never did well at TI, That's the first thing people bring up if you're trying to contrast him with the other great players. So, Conrad, why does Arteezy kind of get a pass from the community?
I think Arteezy, as well as just, in general, his performance over the past few years has been pretty consistently good. He's always been known as this top 3, top 5, team, always been on those squads. And I think for me, at least, that's kind of given him that pass. He's won, I think over a dozen LANs. Yes. It's just, he has been consistently good. He's just never won those big events.
Okay. What do you think, Noxville? Is there any other factors we should consider?
I think also the fact that he plays in NA, and NA fans are very vocal about NA players and the NA scene as a whole. So there is kind of a barrier, like whenever someone from Europe criticizes a NA player and vice versa, there's just like a rivalry between them. So in that way, he's always been like Conrad said, one of the top teams in a region that has very vocal supporters. He's going to be supported and defended by his fans.
Okay. Skim, is it actually a storyline that Arteezy himself seems to be very cognizant of and care about a lot? Does he emphasize that much?
Well, I think if anything, he's sort of that golden boy in Dota, right? Not necessarily right now, but he's sort of been that golden boy. He's like pretty much like the first sort of like really raw talent to come out. After him we had like Sumail, maybe all those like big talents. But Arteezy was like the first golden boy in Dota that we had that people kept praising. So if you would look up sort of talents at the time, you'd only come across Arteezy pretty much. Everybody in NA started talking about him, and then of course he joined Kaipi, or he helped Kaipi play, which obviously was one of the most popular teams at the time, with Sing Sing and Envy. And he sort of, I think Arteezy just established himself very early on as just like, the next Dendi, if anything, like a personality that you would like, a player that you could watch, that he's really, really strong, really skilled. And I think because of the time where he broke out, it sort of, created the narrative around him that he's sort of just a very likable character. It obviously helps that he has a very likable character, right? He's not necessarily as arrogant as other people may be in this position. And he's not that kind of edgy type. We've seen PPD and Sumail, for example, very recently being very vocal on Twitter. Arteezy is just not that kind of type. He'll barely pick fights in public. There has been that incident with Crow. We'll probably talk about that later, of course. But in general, Arteezy has been very sort of low key and just very Dendi-like in many aspects. If you watch his streams, he doesn't always talk that much. Same as Dendi. Dendi just has his music on, sometimes his camera, and then he'll just play some Dota and like tons of people will watch. And in a lot of ways, I feel like Arteezy, just because he came out at a time where he was the only talent to come out as well, I think it just made him sort of very popular in every region.
So first of all, just even though, yes, most of the people watching this are going to be hardcore Dota fans who know this, let's just outline what people's thoughts are, right? In the intro there where I said, we're talking about a solid 3 or 4 years at least, he has been considered, one of the best players in the world. I mean, you already have to say Western, obviously, because as we were saying, that generally there were very good Western teams, but there weren't always the players that were just individually were hyped as much as Arteezy. But is it reasonable for each of the years from, I mean, obviously it was like late 2013, they had that big run with the Columbus one, but 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, each year of this, does anyone feel as though he wasn't like one of the best players in the world, or did he ever have a peak and a valley in terms of those years? What would your take be?
I mean, I think there's definitely a valley, kind of in 2016 with the secret swapping, with him and Universe going over to Team Secret, and I think that was definitely the dark times, and just figuring out how to rebuild that team. And I think they found a lot of success after that TI, but coming into the TI, I mean, they bombed out, right? Like they were terrible. Like that's the only way to describe that team. And on paper, that team had a lot of potential, had the best players in the world, and they weren't able to perform. And I think that was Arteezy's kind of lowest point. And a lot of people forgot that time. And to me, that's been the most surprising, hearing like this sort of story throughout the years. Okay.
Because to contrast that, the other side of it that I thought was interesting, I want to get everyone's take on this. Anyone who wants to jump in, yeah. Is that, while yes, I think Conrad makes a good case there. There was a period where perhaps either in terms of like the team he was on, it didn't make as much sense, and the results definitely weren't as good. There was a lot more up and down at that time. One thing that makes this topic very intriguing to me, and why actually I don't know the answer myself, so I want to get some people who know more about the game to talk about it, is that when I actually have watched Arteezy play at most of these tournaments we're talking about, the international, the majors, what's funny is I've noticed the times when his teams had the worst results, to me as a layman, it actually didn't look like he was one of the players who was necessarily a problem in terms of his play. Like, I remember famously that one with Secret where they'd won the 4 tournaments and they went into TI, and actually he looked pretty fucking good in that team. Him and Zai were like balling, I thought, and then the rest of the team, people like S4 that looked like they were kind of shitting the bed a bit, So what's people's take on that? Because that's why it's hard to nail down how much he's got to do with it, because it seems like even in losses he sort of plays pretty well generally.
Yeah, I think... Oh, well, I'll just go ahead. I think you mentioned the comparison between him and Eternal Envy earlier, right? Why he's not getting shit on in comparison to Eternal Envy. And I think one of the reasons is because Arteezy also just has much cleaner play. Like when I try to take notes for this show, I tried to go through through my memory and through a couple of replays, try to see what's been like the big fuck ups for Arteezy in terms of Dota, right? If I look at Eternal Envy, I could probably list 10 for just last month. But Arteezy, it's just so difficult to find something where he just literally shit the bed and dragged his team down, or where he just pulled some really stupid stint. He's usually the kind of guy that has a very clean execution, kind of does what a carry needs to do in a lot of ways, and he also plays very sacrificial in a lot of ways. But generally speaking, he does really well and is very consistent. Like when people talk about consistent players, I think they tend to exaggerate a lot when they talk about the performance. But I think it very much is appropriate for Arteezy here because, yes, like you said, even in losses, he is still a very solid player.
I think that's true, but at the same time, some of the things that Eternal Envy's done and got famous for, there was a game where he played anti-mage and he went second item Divine Rapier. There's certain crazy things where I think Arteezy has a mindset on how he wants to play the game, how he envisions his team is going to win, and what he has to do to get there, and he just sticks to it. Where other players might adapt more, might have either different opinions coming in that is just more helpful for their team. So I think it's difficult to kind of understand exactly what happens and who makes the decisions that determine how the game's going to go.
Okay, well then along those lines then, let me ask this then, maybe as an adaptation to the question. Does he play in these kinds of settings where, people are going to look at the stars and you're losing the game or it's going badly? Does he play too conservatively, too safe? Does he just play to that one condition of I'll just farm up and I'll try and just stay in, I'll get mine basically? Because, if you want to contrast him, when Skim was given the example there of players who mowed him down, that's what I've always thought about Sumail. He either had the great ceiling where he just was fucking amazing, or he could just feed away a game sometimes where it didn't go his way. But in a weird way, I can see why people sometimes praise that sort of player, because they feel as though you gave yourself more chances to win in a way. Whereas sometimes when you play a bit more conservatively, people think that, maybe you didn't make the key risk that might have made you look bad, but might have won you the game.
I think he's willing to take the risks 100%, but he knows what his strengths are. He on paper, Arteezy is one of the best farmers in the game. Not even within the Western scene, across all regions, across all roles, he is one of the ultimate farmers. And he knows that that is the way in which historically he's won. And if he has to do something risky in terms of farming, he'll do that. He'll go out. He'll make the decisions that he needs to make. And sometimes it works out for him. And in those games, those are incredible. And then at other times, it just baffles people. But it's so hard to say when you're a carry, like to allocate blame, because it's like the typical mindset when people play Dota. They try to put the blame on other people, and in a professional game, someone sees a support who's 0 and 20, and they say, okay, obviously it's his fault they're losing, but sometimes you milk and you have to do crazy things that the stats just don't show.
Also, those kind of really big risks that, for example, we referenced from Eternal Envy, almost no carry player, I don't think, does that actually. Like those like really high reward risk, but also
Shadow did that a lot for wings.
It's one of those things that's not necessarily a common thing that where you look at every team and think, all right, this carry is definitely going to pull off this crazy shit, right? It's still I think most carriers will try to play the sort of like safe game where they know, all right, I mean, we just secure me some farm. They're like little risks, like Ben mentioned, farming potentially in high risk areas, but those aren't necessarily like big risks as we see from like Envy or Shadow, of course.
Okay.
I think the biggest difference between those as well is that Arteezy notoriously has been on Evil Geniuses and Team Secret, and both those teams have had very strong leadership and very, they'll go into most games with a game plan. And our tour, at least from my personal experience, has been very much, try to be that team player as much as possible and build that team up. Right? He's not gonna play for himself. He's gonna follow the plan and to the best of his ability, adapt where necessary. But obviously, Envy being on something like a Fnatic, for instance, right now, sometimes the game's just kind of out of control. You just take your own control in that situation, right?
Sure. Okay, so then a topic, like sticking on him as an individual player first as a general theme. Another aspect that we've seen of his career has been that he's sometimes played the two positions. He's played a mid, but even then, he's kind of done it in his own, still in kind of a carry fashion, right? So what's that choice been like in his career? Because obviously if you take a year out of your career, you take time out in different teams, it's going to impact your success positively or negatively. So what have you thought of the experiment where he's been mid?
I think that's more of like a meta thing. The metas at the time were really focused on farming, your mid player as much as possible. And now I think we're seeing Liquid have a lot of success with having Miracle move around. And I think the Evil Geniuses' most recent change with moving Samil into the off lane and Arteezy into the mid role, I think is going to be a little bit more of that, trying to get Arteezy more farm, what we've seen a lot of success in the past with.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a case to be made. Like in the past, we've seen some of the most successful teams of all time. Like you have 3 cores and one of them kind of has to be sacrificed in some way. Yeah. So on Evil Geniuses, they had Universe, who was widely regarded as one of the greediest offlaners in the game. Sure. One of the most, basically another core that just happens to be in the offlane, happens to have a bad start, but is given space to catch up. And then you have Arteezy and Sumail, who have actually averaged very similar amounts of GPM in the game. And compared, like Conrad said, to Miracle and Matumbaman on Liquid, where they have a 6% GPM difference between them in terms of team net worth percentage. So I think that is, by moving Universe away, it's going to create a similar effect to S4 being on something like the TI3 Alliance, where he plays a sacrificial role, more of a utility role, is able to still go mid in certain matchups if he's got a lot of experience, like on Puck or on Queen of Pain, and that allows you to have versatility in your laning matchups. But I think that this Universe leaving the team and Sumail moving to the offlane is a very reasonable and logical experiment. So when it happened, people were kind of aghast with it, but I think it's going to actually be very good for EG, or at least it's going to be a deal breaker for them.
Okay. Because one of the aspects that ties into this as well is that, okay, here's the interesting thing. So Eternal Envy in his career has made that quite a big point. I did a video of this recently about that Stu made an article about, where he's often stressed this angle that he didn't want to kind of ride anyone's coattails and join a team that was already winning, or necessarily play with the other superstar players. Yes, he did it briefly in that secret team where he teamed up with Arteezy, but generally he's kind of brought people through his teams, or his teams actually, obviously didn't succeed, and therefore you can see what he was going for, but it didn't always work out, right? Arteezy hasn't taken that approach. We've seen him a number of times. He's had some of the most high-profile swaps in the game. He really has done teams where he's tried to stack together the other good players and for whatever ends. Has that helped or hurt him? What do you think?
I mean, I think he made logical decisions at that time. You know, you look at the roster of Secret in 2016, you're like, wow, this is on paper one of the best teams that has ever been created. And obviously, we all know how that ended, and that failed miserably. And in my opinion, you know, I think he has really got a winning attitude and a winning mentality. You know, he wants to make sure he has the best chance to win. And logically for him, that's creating the best teams and following the best. You know, Envy is somebody, you know, just to know, I've previously managed him, and I've seen a lot of his mentality, and I think one of the big things for him is he wants to create something new and create, you know, something where Arteezy is just trying to win as much as possible and be successful. I think is the biggest thing for him.
Okay. Because, I mean, along those lines, okay, yeah, what were you going to say?
It's also worth noting that, you know, the 2016 team Secret, I mean, he joined Puppy after he knew what they were capable of before, right? In 2015, they were very, very successful with him. And obviously, if you consider the position that EG was in, and if you could just think about it, you know, I think in Arteezy's mind at that point, a lot of the issues that the previous team Secret in 2015 had were not necessarily fixed, but some of them were gone. Yes. And then, of course, he would not only join Poppy, you know, one of the best leaders we've had in Dota, but also Eternal Envy, like a really, really good friend of his, obviously, and just somebody that he's already known for a long time, that he knows how to play with as well, to a degree at least. So in that sense, I think like Conrad said, it was a very logical decision to actually make that move. And obviously, yeah, we know in hindsight it didn't work out, but in general, I think Arteezy, like Conrad said, is a player that has that winning mentality. But at the same time, he also values friendship a lot. I mean, even Crit moving to EG is not necessarily because Crit was the best player at the time for that position, but I think they realized, you know, they have a bond, and I think after. I might be overstepping here, but I think after the experiences they've had with PPD, I think they wanted to emphasize personal relationship as well, in addition to obviously having a skilled player and captain on the team.
Okay. Along these lines then of him making these big roster moves, right? I definitely agree, Conrad. Actually, I think one thing that people went too hard on is after the fact, when those teams had their problems, people were sort of like, see, you shouldn't have left Team X or whatever, you know. Right. But I agree, almost every time he made the move, I understand actually part of why his ex-teammates were always pissed off, because he usually did end up looking like he got the better end of the deal, and it looked like they were the ones like, oh, fuck, he's left again, and now what do we do, you know? Hence why they had to make some very weird moves last minute over the years. But along those lines, though, should he, hypothetically, would he have already won one of these majors if he'd have picked one of these teams and been like, this is my team, and it's the other way around? People leave or people join and I stay pot, and I kind of try and create something more permanent. Would that have been a better route to have taken to win a TI or to win a major?
I don't know. I think it's a little bit of a mixture, you know. Obviously, Arteezy has had, you know, multiple kind of like small feuds, or, you know, he feels certain ways about people on certain teams. And, you know, I think that led to some of his roster moves. And I think one of the big things, though, is that the reason why you see him like join these big leaders and these popular players is I think he's also a very good supplement. You know, he is somebody who really thinks about the game and brings a lot to any team, but he'll never be the number one leader. He'll be, you know, kind of one of those second in commands, or really helps drive those conversations. If he stuck with, you know, EG, yeah, I think he could have seen some success. But at that time, I think when he was doing a lot of those swaps was when, you know, EG had Sumail come in and Fear was still playing the 1 role and really wasn't planning to move into the 5 role. I also think, you know, EG in 2014, that wasn't his fault. Mason ended up having to stand in for Fear, and that's like one of the big ones that I think, you know, if they had Fear, I think there's a really good chance in my mind that they would have won that TI, but also that was also the worst TI, so maybe nobody wants to win that one anyways. But that's just, you know, yeah.
I think the thing is that, like, Eternal Envy is like what we would call a theory crafter, maybe along the same lines as like Awi and a variety of other players who kind of, you know, innovate. They come up with great new strategies. I don't personally think Arteezy is on a similar level to a player like that. I think he's just like an optimizer. He's someone who knows where he wants to go, and he like chooses his path, and he just makes sure that like it's like a PvE type thing. He's just going to get there in the best way possible.
So
And
I'll actually disagree with that. But
Okay.
sorry, if you want to finish your point.
I mean,
like,
it's very difficult for us to know because obviously you're a person who's managed the teams and worked with them. So almost all of the like things that we're going to say and talk about here are like beyond from like the fan perspective or
Speculation.
yeah,
it's
I guess I'll provide a little bit of insight into this because I've just known him for a long time, and I think one of the big things is that he speaks to all those players. And maybe I think you're actually half right. He takes a lot of those ideas and then optimizes them, and so he'll talk to Envy, Mason, these top players to try and, create, the best possible, way to farm or the best, and I think a lot of top players actually do this. And that's why we're seeing a lot of, these teams become a little bit more even as time goes on and players are getting better in general. It just happens to be, did you farm right? Did you get the right rune? And I do think, some teams will always perform better just based on team, but these individual players are starting to enhance. But I really do think, one of the big things about EG right now in its current state is there's a lot of thinking minds, a lot of smart minds, but then they've siphoned off the leadership and made sure, hey, this is going to be my final word, and I think that's going to be a big thing with Misery coming onto that team.
Yeah.
Okay. Because, I mean, one of the big problems I see in terms of giving Arteezy a pass entirely on not winning one of these tournaments is that there's plenty of really great players in Dota who were definitely fabulous individual players. And you know what? Maybe they didn't get the right team or they didn't have the right leader. It's hard to make that case in any respect. Arteezy arguably had more teams that were capable of winning these tournaments, more great leaders that have been alongside him, fantastic teammates. And in fact, you look generally, and unfortunately, he is one of the few sort of connecting factors of when they didn't win those massive tournaments. A lot of them won after him or before him. And, so what can we take from that, Noxville? Is there any kind of a conclusion or a pattern that follows him around?
I don't really think so. I think the underlying point is just very often it's so hard for us to look with a true objective perspective and just look at what has happened and work out in our head what went right and what went wrong beyond the game itself. It's so complicated to understand what's going on in a game of Dota, and you kind of get wishy-washy in the head when you're trying to why is this player in this at this point right now, what is he doing right there? And I don't understand. I don't think anyone can really understand that looking out. So I think my opinion on this specific point is infinitely worse than someone like Conrad's.
I mean, I think maybe I'm just maybe too friendly with him, but I think it's just genuinely been an any given Sunday kind of problem. I've seen we looked at Secret 2015 coming into TI and everybody was like, this team is going to win, and then they bomb out and OG at certain events they're gonna, and then they lose to Fnatic and you're just like, what's going on? And you just don't understand it. I think Dota has that any given Sunday kind of problem, but also you will see those top teams always be consistent, and like I said, I think that's why Arteezy gets that pass so often. He's just been consistently top player, and he's never been one to blame. The only one game I can think that he's truly been horrible was that one infamous Starlight or Ember game that everybody will. Right. That's the only one that has ever actually really stood out in my mind, and that was truly a horrific experience. And I hope nobody has to go through that again. But I think he might be one player, but I don't think he is necessarily a contributing factor to why that might be an issue.
Okay.
All right. Also could be a relationship thing. Players, especially in those tough games, can be really heated, and you just say one wrong thing and you put your other player on tilt, and the whole game changes, right?
Okay, come on, Skim.
So for me, when I looked at all the past results from Arteezy, I think in performances especially, I think the one thing that stands out to me is the fact that he doesn't command the sort of stardom position in his own team a lot of times. And I think when he did for Secret or KP or whatever, Speed Gaming, whatever he was representing, they won. They won a lot of times when he was the star player, when he was the focus of the team. Yeah. With Secret, when they had their spell dominance, it was all about him. They had issues going into that team, obviously, in the beginning, right? They were horrible at the beginning. They couldn't figure out how to work the dynamic between S4 and Arteezy. But the dynamic was just, all right, let's just make sure that Artur is actually our carry and that he's going to pull us through this game. I'm not saying that they played, the 4 Protect 1 kind of thing, but I just think that playing around him has proven to be a rather successful sort of recipe for both Secret and Speed Gaming. And if you look at EG or of him at EG or with EG since, I think he's played more of a sacrificial carry position, which they've done before. Obviously, Fear, when he was carry with EG for the longest time, he's been a very sacrificial carry in a lot of ways, making sure that, all right, we'll sack the safe lane. We'll make sure that Sumail Universe get their farm, get their items, get their space, and that's how they won TI. And in a lot of ways, I thought that Arteezy actually sort of started to fill that role. Even did an analysis on that on Dota2, by the way. It was a quick sellout. But there were a couple of games where they then decided, hey, you know what? Let's sack Universe. Or let's have Universe sort of be that engaging sort of core in the beginning. Let's give the space to Sumail and Arteezy instead. It kind of worked out because, in a way, Arteezy was still doing pretty well, but it just didn't work out because Universe wasn't that kind of player, and he never will be that kind of, or unlikely going to be that player anytime soon. So that is why, just a big leap here, that is why I think the new EG is also going to be very strong, or that's my assumption anyway, because they will have that sacrificial carry again, and it's this time not Arteezy. And Arteezy is going to be finally in that mid position where he will demand that sort of attention and that sort of farm and space.
So part of this, to me, in my eyes, is just basically not looking at Arteezy's career as like with Secret or with EG or with Kaipi or whatever team he's in. I think rather just look at his entire professional career as with PPD and without PPD.
Yes.
And I think that is like when he was with PPD, he got better results. We can dig into these a bit more, I guess, but he got better results on average with PPD. But PPD said many times that like he views as that Sumail is a star of the team. And that kind of makes sense that he's going to prioritize Sumail. He's going to give him as much like space as he possibly can. And now that Sumail's moved to offlane and Arteezy's got the space, that's really what we're going to see now is PPD's like past assessments and past statements going to be proven right, or is it going to be proven wrong? Or is it even fair to compare them?
I think the thing for me there as well is that, those players have changed, right? They've both grown and they're both developing. And I really agree with Skim here with, the movement of Arteezy back to like being that star, that farm. I think they're going to put him in a role similar to Liquid and Miracle, I remember Matumba Man before he was on Liquid and, he was considered the star player on 4 Anchors, and him and Jarex, like definitely, that kind of role. And then when they moved over to Liquid, all right, now you're going to stand back. You're going to let the mid do all this. At that time, those
yes,
heavy in the meta, and I think that EG is looking to emulate that. Bring Arteezy back into that forefront and be one of those heavy farmers and carry that team to victory.
So then, has it been a flaw, at least currently, in some of the teams he's joined, agreed to join, put together, the one where he's gone for teams that had too many stars in that sense? So he's been in the one where he was in Sumail and Arteezy on EG at the same time, and he was in the S4 secret team, and then he had Eternal Envy in his secret team. And you see some of these lineups on paper look worse when they win the major or TI without him, but they win somehow. So how do you tie that in? Like Noxville, do you see it along the lines that Skim was, that he should have just set himself up to be the star? Is there a logic you can see why? I mean, I understand why star players have that mentality. It's currently actually very much in vogue in basketball, which is like, if you haven't won, you think, fuck it, I'll get another guy who hasn't won. We're both superstars. Surely between the two of us, we'll take care of these guys. It's the dream. You think you're just going to style on everyone, but in team games, it's always obviously not just about the names, right?
Yeah, I think that there's like a lot of interesting dynamics in the game which are like super essential. And when you're setting up to be like a star, like this super heavy carry that gets so much farm and does all these things, you need to have someone else who's going to take the hit for you. And in the past, it was PPD who was willing to be like a 6th position, really.
Yes.
Yeah, he's just got almost nothing at the end of the game. And Solo on Virtus Pro is in a similar position. He has to make so much space and sacrifice so much so his cores get a lot. And I think with Misery coming onto the team, Arteezy's not going to actually have to change that much. Arteezy is just going to farm a little bit more because of the space that's created by Sumail moving to the offlane. And Fear is obviously, as we know, he's so versatile. He's played almost every hero in the game, in a pro game. He can do whatever it takes. So I think that Arteezy is going to just auto glide into the correct path now. If everything goes to plan, and I think Misery is going to be a strong leader on this team as well. Misery, Fear, they're going to sacrifice themselves. Sumail's going to sacrifice himself, and it's going to basically put Arteezy in that place. Like he's set up to be like how Miracle is being run in Liquid. I think it's going to be perfect. Fine.
Sure, because I mean that is obviously a key factor when you look at. That's one of the things I find most interesting about Dota. Actually, is that in some of the other games I follow, you have amazing shot callers or leaders, but they are always ones that win. Actually, in fact, funnily enough, sometimes they don't, because sometimes, for example, they might sacrifice and take less star players, so that someone executes exactly what they want more. But I've noticed in Dota, I don't think actually people are just being results oriented. Generally, the greatest leaders tend to get the majors and they tend to get the TIs, and it's key to have stars, but it also feels like it's key to have stars with the right leader who knows how to use them and how to set everyone else up around them. And if you look in his career, I mean, I can't remember who it was who referenced it earlier. Oh, it was you, Conrad. The period when he was with PPD, and in fact the first period in EG, that looked like where, yes, if they hadn't have had the scenario with Mason, everything looked set up to win TI at that point in time. Like if I could take Arteezy back in time and redo his career, I'd tell him, just stay on EG. Somehow, whatever you do, as difficult as it might be, you and PPD have to be there, and then let the others switch around you and trust that he'll figure out which players to put around you and how to adapt. And then he'll let you do you, and then hopefully you win. Because obviously, by the way, the ultimate irony of his career is, as you mentioned, Skim, yes, he wanted Sumail to be the star, did PPD. Well, there never would have been a Sumail in EG if Arteezy had not left. He, in some ways, set up his own future problems there. He was the Sumail of that team in some ways, right?
Yeah, especially.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
No, I was saying, especially during that era, that really hammers it home. Back when he first kind of joined, Sad Boys was kind of developing, and they were dominating the early parts of the North American scene. Arteezy was definitely the star. Skim was pointing out, he was this up and coming kid. He was going to be the next big thing in Dota, the next Dendy, the next top player, and he was.
Yes.
And he delivered to that point, and then as he kind of became a little more senior and through his sophomore and later years, he took that step back and wanted to become more of a team player. And I think now with, like I said, the change, I hope to see him back at that top form.
No, I was just going to say, it's a bit unfortunate for him with Sumail in a lot of ways. Obviously, Sumail is a great player, of course, but it kind of forced Arteezy almost into that backseat position. Like Noxville pointed out, I think it makes a lot of sense, or it has made a lot of sense to build a team around Sumail because he is that star player and he's proven it. I mean, he won DAC and TI as a star player, of course. So it makes a lot of sense to continue building the team around him. But I think as the meta has changed and as the teams have changed or the player have changed, I think this step now makes a lot of sense as well, because yes, you would move Sumail from his signature mid position to the offlane, but today we see still offlaners do a lot of things that we've seen from mid players usually. Obviously not the same, and we sort of, even if anything, gone back a little bit in the offlane meta, but generally speaking, I think it makes a lot more sense to build a team around Arteezy now, because I think Arteezy in the meta right now, we have a lot of farm heavy cores in the mid right now. This is just his style. If anything, he was actually the one to sort of bring it to this mid lane. His Naga mid. I think obviously he wasn't the one to invent Naga mid, but I think his Naga mid definitely set the pace and definitely set the meta at the time. Very efficient with farming camps from the Radiant mid, something that I don't really think we've seen as efficiently done as we've seen from Arteezy in this time with Secret. And I think this is just something that, EG will look to, or I mean, obviously this is something that EG are now building around, and I'm very excited because again, Arteezy, like Conrad, or like we've all been saying, Arteezy can be that star player. He has been that star player if he's given the space.
Yeah, and also hopefully for Sumail, the migration to offlane goes as well for him as it has for Fata and for S4 and for other historic excellent mid players. And if that works out, then that's just another box that's getting ticked off for EG to do well going forward.
Okay, so obviously a key topic here is the relationship of Arteezy and PPD, because the times when he's left the team, even though I definitely agree with the way you framed it, Conrad, it's not like he left just to leave. He went because he thought he was going to a better scenario. And in fact, in perhaps a little bit of a naive move, probably thought, right, well, these are all new players I'm going to join, so I'll have none of the old problems that I had with whatever group I'm with now. But if it wasn't for that, put it this way, in terms of play and their impact on the game, you would expect these sorts of players, PPD, Arteezy, to stay together. So clearly, the personality conflict or the difference in mentality? Like, I mean, you've touched on this before, that I forget who it was who said this. Was it Skim who said that he likes to be more, is more about friendship in some senses with players he plays with? Well, PPD has shown the counter philosophy there. He is more than willing to be the bad guy in a team, to be considered an asshole, as long as what he wants gets done and they have success in the game. So they're kind of at odds philosophically, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's part of the reason why Misery is being brought onto this team. We looked at Digital Chaos, the year that they got second place, and throughout the year they had middling to poor results. And I think Misery put them into shape for that event, and I attribute a lot of their success to him. Obviously, I think everybody performed, but I think him as a captain coming onto this team is going to help bring that. And in terms of PPD, I mean they saw a lot of success. I think PPD as a captain has been proven to be fantastic, and I'm very curious to see. Obviously, he hasn't seen the same success with Optic yet, but we have yet to really develop these teams into this 2017-2018 season and really find out what everybody's actually worth.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to be said, like you kind of touched on there with DC and TI6, like they were pretty mediocre for most of the year. They weren't
bad.
They weren't. No,
mediocre's a little bit kind.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they were bad to mediocre, but they did show decent signs. But the TI. So what happens in big events, which is mostly the 16-team group stage into playoffs, which is the traditional format for all the majors, sure. the big majors, all the TIs, is you get a meta which develops inside these events, and going into a tournament, you can either be a team that you think you're going to be able to like heavily guide the meta, or a team which knows that you're going to have to adjust. And I think for DC going into TI6, they kind of got a bit lucky that the meta moved in a way which really, really helped them out. Like Mu had a hero pool which was not that extensive, but the meta moved in such a way that all the heroes that he was good on were excellent. And I think that when it comes to these big events with all these metagame shifts, it reaches a point where there is actually some luck involved in having prepared in the right way for the event. And under the guidance of PPD, they were always able to prepare in a very versatile way. They were able to adjust, and they came third, 4 times in these events, and that's a really, really good result. If you think about the fact that a team like OG took out 4 of the majors themselves, so like the amount of skill required to kind of get over that hill, get over that mountain, and win a major or win a TI is extraordinary. And unfortunately, there is some elements of luck involved. So maybe Arteezy's just been unlucky. Do you think that's reasonable to say?
I mean, by that logic, he's probably the most unlucky Dota star ever, right? Because who else has not won one of these events but finished like 3rd place 6 times or something mental, something outrageous.
I mean, and just also a testament to his skill, right? Like he's always been able to be on a top team and elevate, and in some cases, hopefully elevate that team to that level. But I think absolutely correctly, I do think he might be the unluckiest Dota player. I might call him the unluckiest Dota player.
I mean, let's just dig into like 2 events in particular: the Kiev Major and the Boston Major, where they got knocked out in 3rd or 4th, and they lost both times to the eventual winners, which were OG. And looking at the Boston Major, where they lost, where Ad Finum made it through into the finals, that is ridiculous to me. Like EG is like if they were to play like a best of 11, I think EG would win like 10 or 9. Like the skill disparity there is very, very large. And in some sense, I mean, sure, 2nd wouldn't be a 1st, but I think it would look great on his resume if he came 2nd into 2 majors. I think that we would view him completely different.
And in the 2015-2016 season with like Frankfurt, Shanghai, I consider Manola kind of a wash for EG and Secret just because they both bombed out of that event. But like he placed top 3 in both those events. I think it's once again, I think the reason that they didn't see success in Boston and Kiev, for instance, are format maybe issues. I think the single elimination creates some issue there, but he's just been so consistent. And I think any one of those 3 top teams back then, that's Secret, OG,
Liquid as well.
Liquid,
later.
during the Shanghai part, and it's just they're always going to be at that level, and it's maybe you just get the right runes during the game, and contextually, I think, like I said, I think that's the reason why he doesn't get hated on as much, as he's just performed so well over his entire career consistently.
Yeah, I mean, when it also comes to, we were talking about TI4 as the event that like no one really wanted, like you don't want to be the team that won that event, but you have to remember that there was the legendary DK 2014, regarded as possibly the best team that's ever been put down on paper. Incredibly skilled, very unfortunately got knocked out. And as a result, it like kind of opened the door for all these other little stragglers to come along. And newbie in the group stage of that event were like literally fighting with each other, like punching each other in the face type of thing. Like their success there is completely unexpected. Their ability to adapt is incredible. And Vici, not Vici J. Vici kind of showed them the path, showed them a little bit of their own strategies, and newbies just said, "Okay, thank you very much, and we're gonna follow that." And EG weren't able to deal with that, or maybe they would have been if they, didn't buy Midas on Alchemist. Like there's so many, like it's so close. There's so like Skim, like Conrad saying, there's so many small like details that can have such a big, profound impact on the game, and I think that. Yeah, TI4, it's something we always want to forget, but it could have been so different.
I mean, Newbie was last place in that. I think they were 9th or 10th. They were in the very bottom of that group. And then, because of the bubble format, it's just, once again, the formats really can actually change a lot. The bubble format, the phase 3, and then they end up going all the way up to the top, and now they're in the upper bracket, with EG and Vici during that time. It's small things like that, just figuring, you're talking about these inter-tournament meta, especially the long ones. You're going to see these teams come out of nowhere, and like I said, EG's been consistent, but especially when our tour has been on it, haven't won as much. You got to really, really be on your A game at all times in Dota, and it's so hard to.
Yeah.
Okay. Was it just a matter of, because they had such contrasting personalities, PPD, Arteezy, were they always just going to be like on and off in this way? Could they have worked through it and somehow, because here's the thing, I could even make the case on the other side of the equation that it might have helped PPD's career. As much as he won, he's also a guy where he had a million top 4s that didn't get converted into the win always, so I'm sure he would have liked a few more majors before he went out the door, and if he'd somehow have kept Arteezy around, it might have happened.
I think one of the one things we fail to look at is how young our tour is. Our tour's only 21 right now. During this time of dominance, and when he's been one of the top players, he's still a teenager. And at PPD, not that much older. He's I think born in 91, so he's 26, 27, right? And these are young guys. They're going to get heated, and I think at the time Charlie was a manager, and Phil's followed suit since then, and they've been able to maybe help some of those things. But there are going to be some. I mean, I think of myself as a 21-year-old who's kind of a shithead, let's be real. So,
I mean, despite Arteezy's persona, he's actually very mature as a player. Like, the way in which he analyzes the game, like after a big loss, sure, he'll say something like, "Boys, we fucking lost." But the next day, he'll be practicing like individual skills. He'll be analyzing the replays. He's not the kind of guy who just, I don't know, 16, 17, 19-year-old me, if I lost something like in a big tournament, I would be despondent for like 2-3 weeks. I would just be like lost in why, like trying to review, trying to think about it. But he just gets on with it. Like, sure, he has like a big party night, and then next day he's back on the saddle.
He's definitely one of the hardest working Dota players that I've ever had a chance to work with. He reviews. That's why I say he's known as an optimizer, but like I just know he does so much research on his own day to day, and just he plays so much more Dota than I think the average player. He's I think that's like one of the most underrated things. He's got so many top level accounts. That's the other side. He's got I don't know how many Smurfs up on the leaderboard at this point, but it's insane.
Yeah, he's messaged me before for very obscure like statistics that like you have to like think, like when you're looking them up for him, you have to think like, why is he asking this type of question? Yeah. Like the type of insight that it gives is so important.
Okay. Well, then here's a question that I'd be very interested to know what you can speculate and come up, what we can theory craft for this one. Yeah. Because obviously when Evil Geniuses won that the what's it called? The DAC,
DAC,
the one where they got in Sumail, and obviously they'd made that superstar secret lineup, and so it looked like in like a movie or something that would be the ultimate sort of triumph for PPD, and it casts Arteezy as the bad guy, you know, and then obviously within the setting of, I guess it would actually be better as an anime. Within the anime, PPD says his epic line after he wins, you know, one less ego, one more championship, right? When people hear that, unfortunately, the word ego is such a hot button term that people are going to think ego means like, you know, you're some outrageous diva or you're just like impossible to play with, right? It doesn't have to be that. Everyone has an ego. Everyone, it manifests in different ways. What would you theory craft? Why do you think like beyond just in the moment bantering and, you know, you have overcome what was a tough situation if you were at PPD, beyond that, clearly that does somehow play into how PPD thinks of Arteezy when you've seen him play with him afterwards, and then now that he's left and he's done these comments with Sumail, etc. What do you think he meant by that? Like, in what sense did he think that Arteezy was in any way, I won't say a negative force, but just was somehow was conducive to winning or not winning in certain cases? What would your theory craft as to what you might mean by that? Taking out obviously the hot take element of it, hopefully.
I think ultimately PPD has not necessarily like a clear-cut idea of how to play the game every time, but I think PPD as a leader can be very decisive. I think if you look at EG's or his teams in the past, he'll always be able to basically set up the team from the get-go. He'll be like, all right, we'll do this, and you'll do that, and we'll draft this way. And you know, every time he has like a set strategy against every specific team. You can tell that the way they draft against teams is very specific. And in a lot of ways, I wonder if just Arteezy perhaps wasn't just always on the same page with him. And PPD strikes me as the kind of person that just needs everybody to be on board with his idea, because he as a leader, he obviously PPD is very confident in his own ability to draft and lead a team, and we've established that Arteezy is also ideas of how to approach the game, but also, you know, likes to vocalize that, not necessarily obviously in a negative way, but just in general likes to talk about, you know, the game, likes to theory craft, likes to optimize. But I wouldn't be surprised if PPD just wasn't on board with the extent of what Artur had in mind for EG and how to approach the game. If anything, I think Arteezy actually did say that at some point later in an interview, that they just didn't agree on the way they played, the game should be played. And I think having that one mentality, just question your decisions, or potentially question your decisions, not necessarily on a nagging level. Oh, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? But more in a, hey, you know what? We could potentially do this. I think in PPD's mind, that could already be a disturbance, which we saw from him kicking AY. Right? He kicked AY partly because he thought that AY was in some ways just annoying to the team. To summarize it, so I wouldn't be surprised if to him Arteezy was just, you know, not following in line enough at that point.
I think another like dimension to it is also just like the way in which PPD won that tournament. So PPD at that time hadn't like won. I mean, they'd won big events, but you know, he still had to get a TI. This was in the early days. He wasn't fully established, and like when Arteezy went to join Secret 2.0, there was kind of a, you know, like a rift between them, obviously. And then Secret went into the group stage of DAC, and they went 15-0. And then they smashed IG in the upper bracket. So there was another 2-0. So they're 17-0 before they lose to Vici Gaming. And it was a close series as well. One of the games was definitely over an hour. Like, it was a very close series. They get knocked down, and then EG just, you know, 2-0s them, like easy peasy. So it's kind of in the same way, like mocking to hurt. And I think that is, you know, it is banter, but it's also, you know, where you at now, Arteezy.
Okay. Yeah, it's also a bit of the mental game. Like, I mean, they realize, you know, some of these small comments that, you know, just anybody makes can also change the way you think, you know, when you go into a big game. And I think, I don't know if that truly affected Artur. I think he's really strong-willed, but at the same time, you know, you see that comment and you're like, come on, right? You know.
Okay. Right. What about, let's go through some of these tournaments then, because that's another way we can also look at it, is look at the specific tournaments. So we did TI4 already. Right, TI5 was the one that we touched on briefly before. It was the one where Secret had won the 4 tournaments over roughly the summer. Then they came in as a heavy favourite. And here's the thing: it's not even enough that they didn't win. right? They finished 7th to 8th. And if you remember, this is what I always tell people about this is, right, forget the games that they actually lost that were the key ones. The one that showed me, like, what the fuck is going on in this team was the one they had against IG before they lost in the round before in the lower bracket, where there was that one game where that was the IG that was like Burning and Ferrari were like half in the grave, but somehow magically won this game with like a classic throwback anti-mage just going mental all over the game. Right, when that happened, and that was, I think, the game also where they were massively winning it, and then the anti-mage like powered up, came online, and then won the game. When I saw that game, and I was like, if they're struggling to beat IG, who themselves probably deep down know like this is the fucking last run of the band, boys, you know, like, they're probably not doing this epic lower bracket run and coming out and making the final. So what was wrong with that secret team, kind of in conclusion? What went wrong at that tournament, do you think, Noxville? Come on, you seem like you have an opinion on this.
I think S4 until that point had been like the backbone of the secret 2.0 team, and that tournament he kind of just fell apart. Like in that specific game you're talking about, he actually played really well, and Arteezy was on the signature SF. Like everything was looking good, but I think that at the tournament S4 he just wasn't on point in the same way that he was at pretty much every big event before that. He was the consistent guy, and like you were saying, it was all about getting the dynamic and the hero versatility right between S4 and Arteezy, and then also Arteezy and Zai. You know, they would often put Zai in the safe lane on annoying heroes like Broodmother, and they would just let him go wild and do his thing, and Arteezy or S4 would go into the off lane. So that kind of core dynamic was like the most important thing. And at that event, S4 just had a shocker. I think his Queen of Pain in the one game was like atrocious. The actual match, the series that they lost to get knocked out was against Virtus Pro, and in that, yeah, like it was a combination of S4's Queen of Pain, and it was also just like I think the draft was like almost exactly the same from Virtus Pro in the 2 wins. So some people could also put that down to stubbornness by Puppy, like
classic Puppy.
Yeah, there's kind of a mentality that Puppy is too stubborn when it comes to drafting. Like he just doesn't respect the opponent, or he goes in with a strategy and he refuses to adjust, which is kind of the opposite of how people view PPD as this tinkerer who's always willing to adjust and try something new. And I think in that event, you can put like their losses down to mostly just S4's play and maybe a little bit to the draft itself. I think Arteezy did what Arteezy has done in the tournament, like every tournament that they won before that. He just farmed like a god, played very well.
And their team play at that event I thought was phenomenal. I was just watching some highlights of, some of the past games, just a little bit of research, and they were doing things that, at that time were considered really difficult, vacuums into, Earthshaker type moves. And those were at that time, not really being done by a lot of Dota teams. Obviously we see a lot more of it now, but, and I thought, wow, this team is playing so well, and yet, the draft wasn't the best, and you lose a couple things, and you lose a couple key team fights, and the game's over, right?
Yeah, it was also funny that the actual like last game that they lost, when they stood up and there were all those emotions, and there was one shot which just came back of the camera moving, and you could see they had like the heroes and the pods, and it was like Arteezy Shadow Fiend, Karaki Rubik, S4 Queen of Pain, Puppy Dazzle, and I don't know what Zai was playing, but it was like four players on like their most iconic like heroes, and they just got absolutely stomped by Virtus Pro, who coming into the tournament were like not regarded as like 8 favorites. Like they should.
I think they went out the very next round, right?
Yeah, they got LG'd.
Which is also the sick part. It's not like the teams that beat them, were on a miracle run themselves. Yeah. The teams that beat them actually just swiftly bowed out right afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole thing is like, even when a Secret lost against eHome, I remember I was at the event, and I remember talking to like analysts. They were like, eHome came up with like a really good, they played excellently, they deserve to win that. But Secret are going to make it through the lower bracket. Like people had no doubts about this. So yeah, I think it was just a collapse. It was failure to adapt.
And obviously, we also know in hindsight that they had internal issues as well, right? Interpersonal issues at the event, which obviously it makes it so much more difficult to compose yourself in a situation like that when you're up against the wall, especially, Thorin, like you mentioned, when they lose a game like they did against IG. I think that just really shakes your confidence, the little confidence you had already to begin with, considering, you have interpersonal issues and that you're not at the best. And I think that just after, losing to eHome like that, after losing that one game to IG like that, I think they were set up for failure. When I saw them up against Virtus.pro, I wasn't confident in Team Secret at all at the time, mostly because they just looked very shaken from their performances earlier. So I think at the time they were just. It sounds kind of stupid because in hindsight they're all really good friends now, or again still whatever. But at the time it was just not working out anymore, and you just knew after the event this team was not going to last anymore.
Sure.
So one thing I just wanted to know is, do you guys think, because of how the format of TR works, the lower bracket is quite accelerated, like there's like 3 games in a row, you're playing quite fast, it has to be done. Do you think that in some ways maybe Secret were like, we're just going to play standard against Virtus.pro, we need to allocate some time to think about how we're going to come up against LGD? Because when they met in the groups, they were in the same group, they drew 1-1, and people were saying LGD, is this a matchup they can afford to lose? So yeah, my question is basically, do you think that there's any parts of what Secret was doing was not focusing 100% on VP and being distracted by their next match? Like, do you think focus is an issue for them?
I've heard this, a couple of these theories like in the past for other events, but I feel every team's preparing. Maybe, I don't know, that was 2015, so the mentality has definitely changed over the past couple of years, but I don't know. I think they always end up preparing. Maybe they prepared less, and they're definitely focused on the next match. But for me, I think players and teams these days, at least right now, are so focused on every single one. Anybody can win. If you give them, we've seen that recently with like Adfinem, and I think at that time, there's a possibility. I could see that.
At the same time, Secret was also one of the first teams to actually have like a dedicated coach at the time, right? They had Theben. So I would, obviously it could be the case like Conrad said, we can't really be too sure, but if anything, I'd say Secret is like the one of the few teams at the event where I wouldn't necessarily put it to preparation. If anything, maybe the mentality going into it was an issue. Like I pointed out with the draft, very stubborn, classic puppy draft. Letting VP draft the same stuff. When they gave VP the same draft, I knew this was a loss, 100%, because this is classic puppy. I've seen this so many times.
Like it's funny. Sorry, I just want to say that like one of the most puppy-esque moments in this regard is when he was playing against EG, and he lets EG pick Lycan for Arteezy. It was like a finals of a 1-star ladder, and like Arteezy just destroyed them with Lycan, like 2 games in a row, and then it got banned out in the one game, and then he just left it open, and they picked it and beat him again. So it's maybe this is one of those things that we can never actually like deterministically say this was the best play or this wasn't the best play, but it's something that is like going to be debated for all time. Is at what point are you too stubborn in drafts?
Well, to me, that topic, especially this exact example you're giving it when they drafted in this TI, actually, if I had to give a theory craft as to why they lost to these teams in the lower bracket, I don't think it's that they didn't prepare or they thought like, we're going to play this next match. It's more like, I don't think they could conceive that they would lose to these teams. I mean, like I told you, they were losing games to IG, who was really in bad shape at that time. This Virtus.pro team, they were actually a decent team, but they were more like an upset team at that point in time. And even so, Secret had been so good before that, if we lose, we're going to lose to like Evil Geniuses, or we're going to lose to LGD, or we're going to lose to Vici Gaming, maybe, I think it's more that they just couldn't even conceive in their brain that we're going to lose to these guys. And so in that sense, Poppy's thinking, well, I mean, obviously we just fucked that game up, run it back. Let's put the same shit in again. This time, we'll show everyone that we're better than them. We'll just win it this and the next one. Because obviously it's a classic psychology problem that when you're the big favorite and you're playing the team that not only like you think you can't lose to them, but you also shouldn't lose to them. When you start to lose, part of you is almost like in disbelief it's happening, and you're thinking, this shouldn't be, something's wrong here. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, and somehow it's all going to work itself out. And obviously in the upsets, it never does. You just spiral off into some nightmare. And the funny thing is, sometimes you're not entirely wrong. Like the next day, if you had another tournament, that team wouldn't have done any of that shit. They wouldn't have had this miracle run and the great game, and you would have been right. You would have just played it out like normal and won the match anyway.
Yeah. Dota players tend to also have like just huge biases. They play a lot of scrims, and something just works in a scrim once, and you're like, this is great, this is the best hero ever, and then you go to the tournament, and especially TI, like Nox was saying, the meta develops, and then you go, oh, this is
Winter
terrible.
Wyvern isn't a good hero.
Yeah, and things can change so quickly, and if you don't adapt, and you're stuck on your ways, you can fall quicker than these teams that we're talking about right now.
It's really funny to talk to pros at the events and then talk about scrim results and like players and team performances, because a lot of times they'll tell you, this team is really hot right now. I expect this team to be really good. They were really strong at scrims, and then they shit the bed like first day. They don't do well at all. Or at Boston Major, we have the complete opposite. WG Unity, they lost so many scrims, teams refused to scrim against them because they considered it a waste of time. And what do? They beat OG the next day. That's just, obviously, you can't just ignore scrim results at all, but Dota is such a game where scrim results just might not matter at all at some point. And we've seen times and times again that they really don't.
Plus, if you're a captain, I have to also say, to be fair, a lot of these captains who are known as innovators and they come up with the brilliant drafts, like when they do it correctly, we all hail them as a genius, how could they think that was going to work? But it did. Yeah. Right? There's an element to which another thing of those sorts of guys is they are stubborn naturally because they're trying to come up with a good idea until they know it's wrong or what's wrong with it. They don't want to let it go. And so sometimes unfortunately, the way that can negatively manifest is like, okay, you guys played that wrong. Like I was right with what I drafted, but let's do it again. And then you do it right this time. Do it the way I told you to do it. And then sometimes you find out, actually, no, everyone was wrong on that one.
And to add to that, obviously we did sort of like, riff on Puppy for that, but obviously Puppy is also one of the best examples of where his sort of like stubbornness paid off, right? The play, him letting Naga, Tide Hunter, and Darkseer through was considered absolutely madness at the time. But of course, he had the plan. He knew how to counter it. Quite literally.
Lights of Heaven. I think Lights of Heaven was the one who actually...
Lights of Heaven was actually the one to suggest the BKB, apparently.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to... We talk about Puppy right now. I mean, going into the 2018 season, Secret is by far the best team coming in. Not even a doubt in my mind. And I maybe in the West. How was that? Is that better for you? I just look at them and obviously they're leading in points. They can afford not to go to tournaments even at this point. They don't need to have every single win, but I think a lot of that's been Puppy and scouting out that talent. And, I think something that we haven't actually touched on is how Arteezy got scouted out and, discovered as kind of one of these big up and comers, even in 2012, 2011, he was just considered some NA Dota scrub and kind of built himself into this, a superstar player.
Well, I mean, in that vein, didn't he also, in some sense, also he kind of set up the route that a lot of the people who've replaced him as the darling Western superstar players have taken, which is that you pluck these guys out of obscurity for their talent. They're not known yet for being in teams and having worked their way. You just see how talented they are and you go, let's plug that agate and let's see if we can play around them and we can win, and it works.
Definitely, especially last season with GH. I mean, his claim to fame is he just had high MMR, right? Like, I think that was... Which
now is actually a qualification. It used to be a joke when you would say, "Oh, I have very high MMR. Can I get in the team?" You're like, "No, fuck off."
Yeah.
Didn't he have a friend or something with like a friend in common with Kuro, and he like just started sudding? Like, I think there's more than...
I don't know the exact story, but he was high MMR. Like that was a basic
high MMR who played supports mostly. Like that was like the other big thing. And when it came to Miracle, like think about it like this: he was like picked up by Fly and No Tail. Like they're also very, very smart players. They saw what they needed. They were looking for a player to fit a specific mold, and they found it, and it worked out. And then next season they did it again, and I'm sure it didn't have the same success as Miracle, but I think if Miracle just didn't exist, like the Anna experiment would still be regarded as a success for them.
I mean, you say like it's a failure, but I mean they still won 2 majors.
No. I don't think it's I don't think it's a failure. I'm just saying the public perception is that it was a failure because compared to Miracle, it just wasn't amazing.
Yes.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean,
in the context of this conversation, it's definitely a success.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but-
Majors are hard to come by as we discuss it. Okay, so Skim, this is the interesting thing. Up to this point, when we discussed TI4, TI5, if this was a world in which the majors had never been created, and we're talking about the majors where there was just 3 of them per year, etc., not the current format, obviously, where everything's now a major, apparently. In that world where you only had TI, I would actually have said in that scenario, the discussion becomes too hypothetical. It's too theory crafting as to why the person didn't win, because a lot of it would be like, you just zigged when you should have zagged, you were on the wrong team, or the right player hadn't developed yet, There would be a lot of lock-in only winning TIs. And as we've mentioned here, actually, funnily enough, if I ever do a show, this would definitely be a great topic. Most of the time, the TI winner was never the even top 2 favourite of the tournament. Never mind, like, the main person supposed to win. Usually the team that's supposed to win didn't win the TI or even make the final. So in that world, it would be a lot more forgivable not to win. But then in the world of the majors, and even the ones where it was just the 3 per year, he was on some pretty good teams and they never won those either. So what happens when we come into when he came back to EG and we tried to, put the family back together, dad's back, we've got the young errant son has left the house, the prodigal son's returned, we're trying to make nice. They were very good, and largely only at the majors, admittedly, but why did it never go right at these first few majors?
I think that EG was, for the longest time, just too stubborn to actually change anything about the team. Not necessarily in terms of, changing players, because obviously a lot of teams these days actually are very reluctant to play because they think to change players because they think the best course of action is just to stick it out with like a set of like core players and just make sure that you have like a very stable foundation. But I think if you look at just the way the team played throughout the entire year, I just didn't even see enough innovation. Stucci and I have been talking about this a lot, but a large reason for why they were sort of successful in the earlier parts of the season, they won like 2 tournaments, I think, or 3, I can't remember right now, is actually just not because of like, they had strategic advantages. They were like superior in so many aspects. No, it was literally just, or not literally, but in most cases, it was just individual performances. I think Sumail had actually a really strong season last season. He was really strong leading up to TI, and EG only, if anything, only clicked because they made sure they had like those individual high performances. They never really showed any sort of meta relevant sort of performances where I thought, wow, they really understand the meta. This is how other teams are going to emulate them. If anything, teams never played what we consider the meta. And I think EG was just for the longest time too reluctant to change anything. I'm not sure whose call it was to not change anything at all. Obviously, this is, it's a bit of a difficult call to make. They had I'm not even sure if Crit was like a clear-cut captain as PPD or Puppy might be like the definitely dominating voice. I wouldn't be surprised if it was more of a team effort, where they have Arteezy, Sumail, and obviously Fierce, the coach at the time, also just chime in. But in general, I think EG was just reluctant for the longest time. So them changing things up now, I think, is just the result of a year of really bad performances, which, Sumail in the recent interview admitted, like they were just not good the entire year.
I think one part of that we have to talk about is that 7.0, like the biggest patch in the last 10 years of Dota 2, came out. And it made the game a lot more complex in some ways, but as a result, it like a lot of the decisions that you had to make became a lot more clear cut as well. So it changed the way in which teams played, how teams drafted, and for the most part, it's been like a patch where your position for Roma has a huge impact on how the game like is developed and how playmaking occurs and how most of the game is actually very much determined by how your Roma runs around and gets things done. And Zai, when he was playing support as a 4 position, was never that kind of miraculous player, I think. He was very mechanical, very thought through, but he was not like a big playmaker. He would be like the kind of guy, I think, that would be like the person that never gets credited enough for the great work he does, but he's constantly making these like good small decisions over and over and over. Whereas right now, if you think about TI, you're thinking about TI7 rather, you're thinking about GH and the huge impact that he had for the team, playing a couple of specific roles in a very specific way. And maybe that's just one thing that EG haven't got right, is they haven't adjusted to 7.0 as well as the other teams. Or 7.0 as a whole has moved the game of Dota away from the style that they like to play.
Okay.
mean, at the same time, I feel like they've just had a lot of success throughout the season. Still, they're still a relatively top team. I think that they say that they haven't been good all year, but in reality, I mean, they're not good as top 8, right? And
right,
or not getting top 3 at every event. And I still think the team is good and they have individual talent on that squad. It's just maybe they haven't come together cohesively enough, but I don't know. I think for me at least, EG is always going to be one of those teams that's going to be one of the best adapters, and same with actually Secret. Funny enough, they're really going to be thinking about the game a lot more than say the average team that won't have 5 top players thinking about these small things and trying to optimize to the best ability.
Sure, but there's like a degree of how much you can adapt. Like if, for example, the TI3 Alliance was playing in a game and the patch right after TI, Nature's Prophet and a Lone Druid were removed from Dota 2. Like, sure, they can adapt, right? But there's a limit on how much they can adapt within themselves and then how much the game is also going to shift as a result. And I think that the whole of 7.0 is something which empowers some teams and it hurts other teams, just like any other patch. And I think that it's hurt them a little bit more than the average team is hurt.
That's true.
At the same time, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that also led to the removal of Universe from Evil Geniuses. I think he has been, fine, but never been, performing to the same level that you'll see like an MC or, some of these top offlaners right now. And I think the removal, I think Universe will probably have to rethink about the way he plays, because I definitely think this current patch has not been to his advantage.
That's basically what I was gonna say as well, because if the patch is not gonna, if the patch basically moves away from you, it's on you, right? The onus is on you to adapt. And if you think with the current roster constellation isn't able to adapt to the meta on time, I think it's definitely on the team to make the decision and just cut somebody from the team. If you really think the meta is just not suited for you, you have to make the call. It's a tough call, of course, because they're all friends. They've won TI together, or most of them anyway. But it's still on them to make that call, and I think that call came perhaps a little bit too late. Perhaps it's the right time. We don't know, but I don't know. Yeah, like Conrad, you have a good point. They're not good enough. Is still top 8, but obviously a team like EG wants more than top 8, right? And this is kind of the point where we're doing this discussion. A player like Sumail, a player like Arteezy, they should be winning majors.
Every single team has the goal, either as they like in the forefront or in the back of their minds, that their goal to play Dota 2 is to win TI. Like, that's what everyone wants. That's what Secret literally said, that when Secret was formed, we're a team that's forming to win TI.
Sure.
And it's maybe a bit strange because like Liquid were a team that were built to win majors, but until like halfway through the season, their performance were like before Bilba left the team, no flames, but I think that their team never I never envisioned them as like their goal right now is to win TI. To me, I thought their goal was just to like place well in the next event and to like get up there to get into a position to challenge for it.
For me, I just want to say Liquid was, I don't think, meant to win TI. It was just literally meant to be the best.
Yeah.
If you look at those players, they're all on top of that leaderboard, and they're just, hey, Kuro's like, trust me, I got this, and he got them. And you're right. I think the results are a big thing, but I think Kuro is a huge part about why. Get the best players. Trust me as a captain. I'm gonna win you everything, and I think that was the biggest thing. He sold those players to be that way. Sorry, we're going off a little bit off topic there.
Listen. I've got talent in this. So if you want to tie together a team that on paper was supposed to win, and this was supposed to be the right players, let's talk about the terrible Secret. The one where, okay, what happened was Arteezy was like, you know what? This whole thing of winning these TIs and majors is fucking hard. What Eternal Envy won? You know what, mate? We were always friends. We were always, come here, mate. We were always supposed to play together. I always used to tell him that in EG. He should have let you in the team, really. How about we make a team? And you know what? Let's get Universe, because he's always been fucking banging in that offlane. So let's get him as well. We'll have Poppy, so we've got the classic leader, Pylai, I remember him. He was there for our early days, the great moment where we all broke out. Let's get him as well. Let's form Team Fuck PPD, and together, surely we'll... Oh, shit, we came last place, the worst ever result. Fuck, what have we done? Like, how did that line up? Which on paper looks sick even now. When I'm watching it now, I'm like, fuck, I can't wait to see this play. Oh, I did. Yeah, that's right. It wasn't good. How did that team do so badly at that major? The Manila major. The infamous Manila major.
I mean, I think they killed
Seems
each
impossible,
other's
right?
team. They killed each other's team. They both were literally last place at that event, which to me, seeing those two names, Team Secret, EG, like I can't even imagine them getting, we talk about top 8 being disappointing. Well, 13th and 16th.
But at least the EG lineup, that makes a bit more sense. You look at that and you go, that is a bit of a ropey EG lineup. The Team Secret one looks fire.
I mean, PPD also like at that event, I don't think was taking it too seriously. Like, I don't know if this is like, okay, whatever. I'm pretty sure it was at that event where he brought his girlfriend along, and he was clearly like not very focused on the event, like sitting by the pool a lot, not practicing and scrimming as much. I don't know if this is like, I don't know if that like is just his mentality, is that he wants to also like balance relaxing and like preparation. But that event to me, I think he was basically like, I'm going to just take a small break here. Like too much has changed too soon before the event.
It was definitely the nicest major. I'll say that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, business class flights, like they did it. But yeah, when it came to Team Secret, I think that if those 5 players were locked in a room together for 2 months, that a very solid team would come out of it. Like, I think that they basically, it didn't work at the start, but it needed a Secret 2.0. Like, it just would have taken time for like the dynamic between EE, Arteezy, and Universe to like reach equilibrium. And I think Eternal Envy would have been the one who had to actually make the biggest change in that type of team.
I agree. For me, it was a much too short-term attempt to try and win an event. This is like the kind of thing, when you're playing Football Manager on your computer and you're trying to win with like your small team, you're just buying every big player, and then you hope for the best and like want to get immediate success. But I think, like Ben said, but also like we saw it from Secret 1.0, or rather, I guess
2.0.
Well, yeah. What we've seen from the 2015 Secret with our tour from that one, we saw that one took time as well. And once they did take their time, they were great. They were one of the best all-star teams we've seen in Dota. But of course, again, it does take time, especially when you have so many personalities, but also certain greedy playstyles. I mean, we established today that EG with Universe, Sumail, Arteezy is too greedy. I mean, they had Universe, EE, and Arteezy, arguably just as greedy, obviously.
I know, yeah.
So if it takes EG a year to figure out, hey, maybe we're too greedy, so we have to change things, it definitely would have taken Secret a lot of time at the time as well. So I think in hindsight, obviously it's easier to say in hindsight, but in hindsight, this team was doomed to fail from the get-go, because the expectation was we need to win a goddamn event anytime soon. But once Universe basically said goodbye after Manila, I thought it was practically over for Secret, because they could only pick from a pool of players that were available. Basically, they could only pick Bulba, effectively, for that offered position. Nothing against Bulba, but I think it seemed like Secret, if they have more time and preparation to pick like from a large pool of players, they probably don't pick Bulba, and it probably is a better team. So I don't know. It's still. It was just a very poor attempt at trying to win a major as soon as possible.
They definitely looked at, well, I don't know if they wanted to win the major. They were trying to build teams for TI, and I think at that time, they thought, hey, 5 months, that should be enough, and it just wasn't. And we saw that, and EG, getting Universe back, I think was just a huge thing for them, and able to push them to that winning finish, right? But I mean, at the same time, what changes could have Secret made? I think at that time, teams weren't really looking at the tier 2 talent the same way that they do now. And if they dove deep, maybe they got, somebody like Kezu back then. We could have even seen more success. And I think, going back to that one less ego comment, I think that's not necessarily an ego thing. It's more a hunger thing. I think Sumail at that time was hungry to prove that he was one of the best players. Obviously we've seen him after that event, talk a lot more, but I think he wanted to prove that he was one of the best players, and not just in FPL or like at that time IXDL, right? And during that time, like I said, Secret, I mean, they just bombed it. Like, there's no other way to describe it. They thought they could do this in time. They started, what is it, March that they did the swap, and it just didn't. It wasn't going to happen.
Sure. Especially with the amount of games they played with that roster, the official games anyway. I think they played like 2 online or I don't know. They just didn't play enough games with that roster on official games. I think that really hurts the team, actually, not being able. I mean, we've seen a lot of the teams that have had like a lot of successes in the past. Wings, CDEC, Ad Finum, even like a lot of those really big stories that we've had in the past couple of years, those have been teams that have been grinding the game, the meta, and grinding official games, trying to play as much as possible against other teams. Whereas this Secret, it felt much worse than the Secret before, just because they just didn't play any games. It almost felt like they didn't want to, they didn't need to. I don't know what the issue was. Obviously, in hindsight, we did have Envy coming forth and telling his side of the story, that potentially some people in that team weren't necessarily as committed to the cause as others. But in general, I just feel like that team just didn't do enough in order to
I think they kind of expected to like high five each other, plug their mice in, and win a major. Like, they kind of just thought things would kind of fall a bit easier. And yeah, like you said, that the teams that are doing well these days are the teams that are putting in the 100 games quarter type thing.
Yeah. Okay. Because then obviously we had another dreadful Secret international where they had Bulba swapped back over. He was in Secret now, and it wasn't good put that way. It went out in the first round of the lower bracket, so that hurts.
I mean, I think it was all downhill from there. EG definitely got the better end of it, and they succeeded, and Secret failed. I think Dota teams are starting to look a lot more long-term now than they used to, and I think maybe even back then they realized, this TI is going to be a wash. We're already not going to, we'll do our best. We'll play a pub essentially, and we'll take our money and go home, and then try and wait for next season. Because the key part about going to TI isn't actually necessarily, even if you bomb out, is not necessarily just winning the big prize, but it's figuring out your team for the next season. Yes. And I think they were all ready to do that at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. Just to add to that, I think they weren't even looking at the TI as a potential, anything really, because a team of that caliber, even if you have interpersonal issues, should place better and play better than they did at that event. Like, you could really tell from their performances that they weren't really looking at anything at that TI anymore. Like, they were already done with that event effectively, because losing in the fashion that they did, and against some of the teams that they did. I mean, LGD at the time was horrible. They were playing with a stand-in as well, Banana, for Seb, who was arguably probably the best player going into TI, but then they had to replace him because he couldn't get a visa. They still lose to that LGD. That just shows me that Secret was just not even trying anymore.
Because then, obviously, afterwards, he returned for another time to Evil Geniuses, but this was the one where I'm glad I actually got to talk about this with PPD in my interview with him, because I was actually amazed how little of this leaked out to the public, where they really thought he chose, like, you know what, it's time to become the CEO of Evil Geniuses. That's what I really want to do. I want to be the CEO of the team. I want to do a lot of emails and Excel sheets and, process invoices. Like, no, what happened was, back came Arteezy, they made a new EG lineup, and they decided between themselves, you're not in it. So, there's two ways we can do this. You can be out of the team, or you can get promoted out of the team. You can go up the organization, and he moved on to the, whatever you'd call it, the front office, and they made EG without him, right? Was that a mistake? I mean, we're not talking just results-based here. Should they have given it another go with PPD for one more year? Would that have helped?
Right.
Was it the right approach to branch off and try something different?
I'm not sure if any of you have actually ever listened to my podcast, but one thing that Stucci likes to say, is that they should have bent the knee. PPD,
exactly,
PPD as the captain has proven himself, I think, enough to justify that. Well, if in
this analogy, he's Stannis Baratheon, isn't he? He's like, listen, I am the true leader of this realm, so you will bend the knee, or else, and they essentially just killed him. So. Effectively,
and I guess the question is, are you willing to win no matter what, and can you put all differences aside? And obviously they couldn't, right? If this was just a 9-to-5 job, and they would just, it was just very results based, and they would have to just go into the office, out of the office, and they don't mind if their boss is a bit of an asshole, I think they just choose PPD over anybody else 100% of the time.
Or if aliens literally are like, we destroy the Earth unless this one Evil Geniuses team wins the international. Do you want PPD or not? They're like, you know what? That asshole can stay. I need to live after this TI.
Effectively.
I think the thing is also just like PPD's personality, like we said, doesn't necessarily endear him to his co-workers, like his teammates, because like they all respect him and they respect his ability to do what he needs to do and play how he needs to play. But unlike a lot of other teams, the kind of like the brains trust of the team is like a pair of players. So like in OG, it's always been Fly and No Tail. In Liquid, it's always Kuro plus someone else. Sure. Like that role kind of changes over time and develops over time. I think Kuro and Mind Control was like regarded as like their brains trust for a long time. And when it came to EG, like you're saying, he's kind of like this guy's like, hey, it's my way or the highway, and everyone just took the highway. And maybe that's a fault of his own, but I think it was definitely a big mistake for EG to get rid of him in the way that he did just to get Arteezy. Like if that's the decision, if you're like, I'm going to form a team starting with PPD or starting with Arteezy, I would choose the PPD option.
I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. I definitely feel EG was always wanting to build around Sumail. They felt Sumail was that star player in that situation, and building around him, and
and in light of recent comments, you could definitely speculate Sumail was a big factor in PPD not being in that team as well as Arteezy, right?
I mean, I don't even think we need speculation at this point. Like
it's fairly confirmed. It's somewhat apparent.
I look at the Twitter comments, and I think they speak for themselves. And I think that was the other thing. They wanted to build around Sumail, and if that required PPD to go out, and I think they feel that's the way to go with it, right?
But that's the thing is although we've seen recent Twitter comments, like to build around a player doesn't necessarily require that like he is part of the decision-making process. You're picking pieces off the shelf to complement that player, like to make it go well. So if you're PPD and you're like, okay, I've got to build this team around Sumail, then it doesn't necessarily require like excellent interpersonal relationships between them. Do you think?
I think more the factor of Sumail was probably like, I don't want to play with PPD.
You think it came to that like?
I just look at these recent Twitter comments, and that's kind of the vibe.
Did he even say it in Hotbit's interview? In his interview with Hotbit, that effectively just didn't want to play with PPD.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think they had a really solid squad. You look on paper, and you look at those 5 players, and you go, this is going to be successsul. I've known Crit for a long time. I had a lot of faith with him going in as a captain, and I think they performed reasonably well. I don't. Nobody should be hating on the performance of Crit, I think, as much as I think he gets. But the team didn't perform to the level they wanted to, and now they have to make adjustments again, and they've done that. And I do think maybe we'll see in the future. One matches I want to see more is more Optic versus EG. I think that's going to be very interesting. But we have yet to see that because the new format is not it's not conducive for it.
So. Got to qualify.
And we need
for the
Optic to get a bit
first.
better.
Yes.
To be fair, the one side of it isn't living up to their end of the equation.
Yeah,
that's one thing I have to say, by the way. In Dota, one thing I really appreciate as a connoisseur of esports drama is in most other esports games, and in fact, most combat sports or sports that are about ego, it's usually people who are rivals who talk the most shit and they have the drama. In Dota, the best drama's inside one team at all points in time. It's like internally secret or inside fucking Evil Geniuses, and it's only when people leave that the cracks all open up and you find out all the family secrets. So it's almost like people are doing vlogs and Reddit posts. It's like the fucking diary room in Big Brother or something. Like, yeah, I hate that piece of shit. He's doing like, what? It's straight fire though. I can't lie. It's entertaining as hell.
I mean, people love to fiend. That's the one thing that they always say about the Dota community. Sure, they love to just talk and find out, every little dark little secret. And I think it brings a lot of the interest into the game, and particularly interest from a casual audience to the hardcore, watching full-time audience, and it really draws that bridge. And why I think a lot of players that do play Dota actually watch competitive Dota as well.
That's why I thought the comment, the one less ego, one less championship. Yeah, obviously there's a certain amount of personal drama there as well, but obviously it's just also just fun banter, isn't it? At the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily hurt anybody that much. I don't think Arteezy was necessarily hurt by it at all.
No, here's the thing.
PPD is the best heel in esports.
Yes, exactly. That's the whole thing as well. It also doesn't have to be strictly true. Like for example, another way he could have done the exact same tweet, which would have the same impact on Arteezy, would just have been oh, hey, Arteezy, I wish you'd have been here to win this one, mate. It would have been great to celebrate with you. That's the other way you do the same banter. That difference is that's like the fake nice guy approach to being an asshole, where you still get the same dig into the guy's ribs, but you just don't seem like as much of an asshole. Whereas obviously PPD was like, I've kind of built my own bed on this one, so just lie in it, won't I? There's no need to sugarcoat this. Okay, so here's the question then. As you said, again, I can't necessarily blame those EG players, indeed, if it was Samael who spurred this, because, again, it looked like on paper, what a great fucking lineup. You got this great, fantastic set of players. Now, admittedly, some of what went wrong with that team, you could also see in the roster moves they did immediately afterwards. Like, it does seem like someone like Crit discovered, you know what? Being PPD kind of fucking sucks when you are a 6 position in a 5 position game, like that's not actually a lot of fun. So what were the flaws in that EG lineup?
I think they were just trying too hard to sort of play with these players more so than trying to build like a team that was actually functional. I don't think that I did think that on paper, obviously it looks like a great lineup. But also, and I think most people have that worry, how do you play Crit as a 5? Like, how is Crit as a 5 position player going to work out in the long run? I'm not going to say that he did badly throughout the entire season. Again, he did have good results, and he had good performances as well. But overall, it was just very lackluster in comparison to what we've seen from his 4 position play. He was one of the most standout 4 position players that we've seen when he was with OG, right? He definitely was probably... Well, he was like a top 2 Earthspread player. Him and Jerix were right there at the top.
Put it this way, Skim, would you agree with this statement? Like, it's not even that he played terribly at the 5 position, but he wasn't Crit.
He wasn't Crit. Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. He just wasn't Crit. The kind of Crit that we knew when we saw him being picked up by EG.
I mean, you could also say pressure. That, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there's a lot of pressure being the in-game leader. Like, I think in Counter-Strike, there's also been a bunch of cases in the past where a player who is making calls in the game takes a timeout and takes some, like, a tournament or two, and he moves into a more relaxed or, like, generic position, and he just plays exceptionally well. So, with Misery coming on...
Like, to give you the context that in Counter-Strike, just very briefly, basically the trend tends to be, there's a lot of players who maybe are like a secondary caller, or maybe they can do it for a month, right? So for a month, we haven't got a leader, but I could do that, don't worry. For a month or 2 months, while it's going well, basically... Or if people forgive you because it's early in your time as a leader, things are all right. The problem is they nearly always bail when they realize, like, fuck, is this just my life forever now? I'm just, I get all the pressure. I have all, sometimes I can make the right call and we lose, or I make a slightly bad call and we lose. And now it's all my fault. Basically the reality of how tough that sort of role is hits them. And that's why typically you tend to stay with the same leaders throughout history. And people even who flirt with the role, they flirt with it and then they go right back to whatever they were used to be really great at before as an individual player.
Yeah, and we've seen, like, basically like the performance of players, like, fluctuates in those times when they have to take over the role and it gives someone else a break. Like, the performance just changes, like, goes all over. And I think Crit now with Misery coming on, it's going to relieve a lot of pressure, and it's going to empower him to basically maybe return to his old form.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk about you're talking about the switching from the role. There was actually one player I feel that has done this the best and switched over has been Misery. If you recall, he won a major as an offlaner at the beginning of the year, and then gets second place at TI. And it's just, I really think he's going to bring a huge his wealth of experience and his leadership skills are going to bring a lot to EG, and I think, it's going to be a big. Allow Crit to maybe expand, allow Arteezy. I think him coming in is just going to allow all those players to excel in a way that's not.
I very much agree, but I feel like the reason that I think we all agree that the roster change they made now is great, right, for EG on paper. Mm-hmm. But I think that just highlights how bad or in my opinion, in any way, how bad the roster in the previous season, or forming that roster in the previous season, was actually getting Crit into that 5 position, having a leader that both hasn't been proven on a big stage, but then also has to switch roles, and then having those 3 cores in addition, because they also have Arteezy on top. So if anything, I think, looking back on it now, looking at how good this sort of new roster is, I think it's worth highlighting how bad that roster back then actually was, despite it looking strong on paper because we see those big names. But obviously it didn't make a lot of sense because, again, they have 3 greedy cores. They have a player that's not been proven on the 5 position at all, or as a captain.
Well, so that's kind of what Dota is like all about, though. It's about choosing someone who's like going to lead your team, not necessarily in the game, but like as a team, as an organization. Choosing someone who's going to do that, making something which on paper like looks good, looks legitimate, and then experimenting, adjusting, and if the experiment fails, like quickly cutting off and saying, okay, well, we're going to go back to, we're going to get rid of you and we're going to go back. So from an outsider perspective, people see like Valve imposing roster restrictions and all this as a way of trying to make the scene more professional. But at the same time, if you kind of view teams as like startups, they want to fail fast, and they want to cut away at this like at a failing organization. Like a team, remember when Aoi got kicked right after TI5? And everyone's like, what is this decision? It's unreasonable. It's completely stupid. It was possibly the right decisions to make. Like, there's no one who
knew he was going to go eventually. You have to do it now, right? Yeah,
you have, like, the earlier you make a decision that's so important, the easier it is for the rest of the scene to kind of reach equilibrium, and maybe you get an upgrade on a player here. You're able to signal to the entire scene, and you're able to like reach this constant and fair states of equilibrium, which you're hoping to abuse in the end. I mean, every evil genius has got that in their mind. And that's basically, I think, what we just saw out of EG here. The changes came in at a time where they made adjustments and it didn't work out. And now they've got to make a decision because coming up in 9 months' time is the International.
Yeah, it's definitely optimizing to peak at TI. Everything else is just gravy on top of that. Everybody tries. Don't get me wrong. Everybody tries at every single event. I don't think anybody's ever sandbagged an event at Dota. I don't believe it. Maybe since I've become a manager, but that when I was a manager, everybody cared way harder than and way more. But I think, you know, you're always optimizing for TI because the prize money is just so much higher than anything else, and you want to peak then. And if you peak then, I mean, you know, it's life-changing money. Even getting top 8 is life-changing money. So
it's not even only the money, of course, right? It's also just being able to. It's not only the money, but it's also just being able to put yourself in the spotlight and making sure that even if this is going to be your last hurrah, at least make sure that you present yourself in a way that attracts other teams. I think Empire, this TI, perfect example, Resolution. This team never had any expectations going into it with a stand, of course. I don't think they wanted to, or they thought they could place whatever they did up in a placing 6th, was it? But they knew that, you know, well, we don't have really anything to lose, so just make sure that we look our best out here. And they, you know, both him and Roger, of course, got picked up by 2 teams.
They came 7th or 8th.
7th or 8th,
yeah. Okay. But that's the thing is like Conrad saying, like after TI is over, like after you're knocked out, every player is kind of in this like trance for like a week or two, and they're all kind of thinking, what's like my next move in life? Like, am I staying with the team I'm in? Am I definitely leaving? What offers are available? Like, if you go to the after parties at TI, any one of them, shout out to Gergs, like, it's like Game of Thrones happening there. Like, people are sitting in the corner, they're negotiating. You want to be a person who's finishes their TI and they can like confidently say, like, I gave it my all. I look like a good investment. People are going to want to invest in me. People are going to want to pick me up for their team. And that's also a reason that everyone views TI as so important, is because the team that wins TI almost always like stays together, mostly like 4 of them. There are some exceptions to this. And then ultimately those teams that stay together mostly just crash and burn soon afterwards. So every team is thinking, even the winning teams now, like even if we win TI, we need to be in a situation that we're going to, like every one of our players is going to want to stay in the team, not go away. And we're also in a position where we can cut the players that didn't perform very well.
Okay. Right. As a last topic then to close this up, we'll just go around the overlay here and you'll each answer this question, okay? Because obviously, again, we've hyped up the EG lineup. Oh, it looks like they've made the right moves. So does this episode become resigned to history? Because with this new EG lineup, Arteezy wins either TI or... Listen, it can't just be a major now because there's 15 of them. So it has to be like one of the really good ones, you know? It can't be like fucking Dream League or something. Okay, Conrad, does he win one finally?
He will win one day. I don't think he'll stop playing.
One day, he's backed up.
I mean, this season,
walked it right down immediately.
Here's the thing, every season's so different. No, I truly believe he's going to win one day. Will it be this year? Who knows? I just feel, I look at Liquid's lineup and I'm like, man, this is insane. I look at Secret's lineup like, damn, this is insane. Like, it's become way harder to win any major LAN since I was managing, just because of how there used to be always this kind of cream of the crop, always was at the top, and now it's just super even and kind of, you know, everybody has a chance to win in a best of 3 these days. So I'm gonna say no, he's not gonna win this season. He's gonna win next season.
Noxville.
I think he's gonna win this season, but like Conrad said, it's so many of these events are crapshoots. So many of them are becoming, you know, kind of. There's not like the same pedigree associated with them now, but I'm gonna agree with Eternal Envy, and I think Arteezy is the best carry to ever exist in all of Dota. He's never been as good.
With that statement. Okay.
No,
Reasonable statement.
I think he's gonna win a major. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, after you've made that statement, I bloody hope so. Otherwise, it is his fault, right? He must be so toxic that no one let him win. Skim, come on, give me the reasonable, grounded analysis. Close to shot.
I think a major is definitely within his reach, but a TI anytime soon, I'm not too sure. I don't think with this roster, I just don't see Misery as the kind of captain that you win TI with. If I look at all the TIs that we've had thus far, I think if you look at all they've all had like that one captain that really stands out, in my opinion. Okay. And it's just for me, it's just not Misery. No offense.
Hey man, he brought DC to second place.
He brought DC to second place. That is. I feel like he can't peak much higher than that, in my opinion.
I mean, you got better players. You got
better players.
I don't know. This roster, I feel is super solid. But will they win? Yeah, that's the hard part to say.
I think honestly, I think if Arteezy wants to win TI, I think he has to almost go like that Eternal Envy / Kuroki, right? Build a team around yourself, not with like these players, like these established star players, but if anything, build a team from the ground up, perhaps. Oh, okay. Maybe have like 1 or 2 other or like known players out there, but I think Arteezy actually has that kind of mentality and the power or like the starship to also build a team around him. So I think if he wants to win TI, I think he has to do that. I don't think this is going to be it.
Well, in that case, maybe he should build a team, like you're saying, get in all new players, all up and coming players he can mold, right? And then obviously make himself the star. And the name of the team, One Ego, One Championship. That could be the name, right? That's a fucking
all you need is
name.
one.
Listen, I'm trademarking that right now, Arteezy.
I will say, I think Dota has some of the best team names out of any esport.
Well,
in my opinion,
my favorite one, right?
That's like the best.
Dude, think about it. The best one ever, obviously, is pure coincidence because Evil Geniuses, right, was a fucking Quake clan from like Quake 1, which then became a Counter-Strike team, which then took many, many years before basically PPD was the fucking Evil Genius after all, the whole time it turns out. And that just, it's almost like, did he travel forwards in time or something? What's going on there? Like, that's outrageous, that name. It's perfect, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It all worked out.
Yeah. Now, if only Cloud9 could have been called Eternal Second Place.
This is PPD. You guys are watching Thorin's YouTube channel. One of the only men with a bigger ego than even myself.